Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to my review of Halo Combat Evolved. That's right, the big dog, the OG. I suppose it depends on the version you play. I played on the Master Chief version, that's got the remaster in it. We'll talk about all of that. But yeah, a little bit out of season, a lot out of season. But this is something I kind of flirt with the idea of reviewing games that are like 10 years removed. I've done a bunch of games from 2014 this year. In fact, the impetus for playing this is because I looked at what was big in 2004, and there at the top of the list is Halo 2, and I thought, well, I can't really play Halo 2 without going back to Halo 1 first. So buckle in, depending on how this is received. Actually, I don't even care if this video flops or not. I still want to go back and play Halo 2, so I will do that also. But yeah, look, from my perspective, again, I've talked about this before, but I immerse myself in a lot of new releases, big and small, and you can get your blinders on. And I would argue, how long before your opinion sorts of starts to degrade if you don't have some sort of relative touchstones to the games of yesteryear. A balanced diet, if you will. And so this could well be a bit more of a regular thing. I do it in waves. Maybe looking at games from 10, 20, maybe 30 years ago. Play the bloody Lion King game or whatever came out in 94. Oh my god, it probably did actually. What a guess. Anyway, so that's the setup. That's how we got here. This game still holds up to this day. You could go play it right now. So I suppose under the namesake, it's worth your time, worth your money, absolutely. But this is just as much a retroactive celebration of one of the greatest games of all time. That's it. I have some thoughts. And through the lens of someone that just played through it yesterday or the past few days. All said, it took me 7 hours to get through, a few deaths and replays and what have you. But, I probably went through at a bit of a reasonable clip, moving through some of the levels, especially later on when it becomes sort of pitched battles between factions. I found it was less about killing every single dude in your path and kind of just power lining through, not quite trying to speed run, but that's just how it felt. So before we dive into sort of some specific examples and observations, criticisms, dare I say, maybe you're a young bloke and you never played it in the first place. Maybe you haven't thought about it in decades. Go get it. I picked it up on the Master Chief Collection. I played it on PC, and it works outrageously well with mouse and keyboard. It has no right to play that well. But it's all a big packaged thing. If you ever missed Master Chief, I think you can get it for like $60 Australian. But it's all like DLC, so there might be a way, and it's a bit confusing for silly old me, but there might be a way to just get this for $15, which is a steal. One of my earliest observations playing this was, and maybe you could say no-brainer, it's kind of the accepted talking point, but just how good the core gunplay gameplay loop is. Though I have a little bit more nuance to add to that. But I think it's widely agreed that the core of Halo is what makes it tick, I even remember them having a docu-series talking about it. It might have been around the Halo 2 release, about, machine gun, shoot, reload, throw a grenade, melee, charge your shields, get back into it, getting the perfect little 10-second loop, nailing it and putting it on repeat. That stuck with me for years because it's true. That's really the core of what's going on here. However, through these retroactive eyes, these old man eyes that have been spoiled by modern everything and looking back, I appreciate this loop even more than I originally did. And it has a deliberate, I don't want to say slow, but if you're an Adderall Fuel Fortnite bloody COD streamer that's, if you ever watch this footage of them bloody sliding everywhere, I can't keep up. It makes me... it gives me a headache, just the speed at which they all move. So compared to that, this would be sluggish, but I find the movement to be really grounding. And it still works. Like I said, I used a mouse and keyboard. It's clearly designed with that sort of, how to say, there's a kind of slower acceleration to the movement that feels thumbstick bound. But it still translates across to the mouse and keyboard perfectly. You don't have a sprint button. You do have a pretty obnoxious big jump, and it's a bit floaty, which in a way kind of makes it not really a combat tool. I'm as old school as they get with old CS and all that sort of stuff, and there is bunny hopping built into my base habits, but that doesn't really come about that much playing Halo. The jump is functional for when you need to actually get to places, but it's kind of an embuggerance to try and work into your combat loop. So that's the one thing that I really noticed and stuck out to me. It might be weird to make a big deal about it, but I just found the deliberately slower movement, no sprint, whatever, controls the pace of this game so much better. Moving through the environments, I would almost liken it to, this is off the cuff, but driving down a highway at 100 miles an hour and not really seeing anything in the peripheries. Maybe if you're playing an F1 game, to bring it back to video games, you don't really see the world and the environment in the background quite so much. And I feel like the way that this game moves at this speed, you do soak in the environment maybe more than if you were Thunder running through a COD level. Again, maybe this seems like a weird point to bang on about, but this is what struck me playing it. While I'm on the gunplay, the core gun, the assault rifle, whatever it's called, is excellent. And I don't know if I've ever really heard this talking point over the years, but it's always floated around the back of my mind. To me, this gun is way more Starship Troopers in its mag dump to take the enemy down appeal. You will put an entire mag into an elite, and I suppose you would juxtapose that against shooting something one shot in the head with a sniper rifle. It's on the other end of the scale, but it still doesn't manage to feel tedious. It does remind me of those kind of moments in, say, the Starship Troopers movie, where you have multiple Marines firing together just to take down one bug. There's something about it. Yeah, okay, these guns are pretty sexy and cool, and they're loud, and they're mag dumping bullets. But there is something to be said about it. It kind of projects a larger shadow of the power of the enemy that you're facing. It makes the elites kind of seem less your equal, or at least from the trooper perspective, because you are Master Chief, the jacked fucking super soldier. But it makes these elites seem, well, elite. That's something that always stuck with me. And don't get me wrong, I've loved all the Halos over the years, and it's cool that they've added in DMRs and battle rifles and a million different guns. There's a bit of a power creep in the pursuit of adding more content, and arguably they kind of nerfed the machine gun, assault rifle, whatever you call it, at some point. I think maybe they brought the mag size down or something. I can't remember. It's been so long. But there is something pure in the design of your main firearm in this. So as far as like the sort of core basic loop that everyone sort of thinks of when they play this game, they're my main thoughts. Oh, one other thing as well. Like I said, the mouse and keyboard I got a lot of value from. The little plasma pistol, I've always been a bit of an apologist for that. I think it gets a bit of a bad rap, as at least anecdotally growing up, everyone thought that was the shittest gun. It was only really good for like a 1-2 trick charged shot into shields, for example, especially in like Halo 2. But I don't know, it must just have to do with the better aiming fidelity of mouse, and maybe I can click faster. But that was my favorite gun this playthrough, apart from the shotgun. Picking up the little green plasma pistol and just semi-autoing it on bloody anything that moves. I loved it. It was really fun. It kind of felt fresh in a strange way. Now, look, I'm going to build upon the loop, because here's something that really stuck out to me, and it's one of those things that I never really thought about it that much over the years with Halo, but I feel like I've almost got fresh eyes going in. But the really cool thing, like what makes Halo tick to me, like if you were to put it to me that way, I would say it is the kind of interplay with the emergent marine behavior. The little dudes running around, barking their little lines and all that. Like, I feel that whole part is the soul of Halo. No one talks about it, no one mentions about it, but I think it's what actually makes it feel immersive and interesting. As a straight contrast, this game is strongest when you're interacting with Marines in the environment, whether you're burning around in a warthog or you're holding off a defense and they're yelling their little lines, or even pelicans coming in, that sort of stuff. When they're integrated into the loop, it is infinitely better than the sort of bathtub curve breaking up moments where it's just Master Chief going solo through a level, maybe with a bit of Cortana banter, and just taking on the Huns in a normal kind of shooter way. Like, to call that weak is a bit rude, but when you compare them, it's night and day. So this game absolutely lives when you're in amongst the Marines. And you're not just one of them. You're, this sort of godlike hero dude, and you kind of get those worship vibes. It doesn't hurt from a power gamer perspective. But yeah, I can't overstate how cool it is, the consolification, or at least sort of lower entry to how you interface with these more, Marines in an environment. They're going to fight the other dudes. They're going to do their own thing. And this was before you could swap weapons with them or even hijack vehicles, that sort of stuff. But the simplest thing, of getting in a Warthog with empty seats and driving it over near some Marines and just waiting, and then them coming over and jumping in and loading up. Again, maybe a strange thing to fixate on, but to me, that makes me feel like I'm in that world and that I'm sort of a part of it. I'm not necessarily directly telling them what to do. I'm not micromanaging them like if it was an RTS. In a way, they don't really have any agency in that case. These dudes kind of have simple agency. Master Chief's rocking up a car. He's stopped next to me. I'm going to jump in and I'm going to bloody blast dudes with a machine gun. It's very cool. And how, it is a bit more scripted than that when you're rescuing them or leading them through hallways or whatever, and they're all going to bloody die anyway, but they're moving with you without you actively telling them what to do. And I kind of found that to be really magic. Then you mix in stuff like really early proto-dynamism through the grenade interplay. Not just that you can throw grenades and stick grenades, very clever, very cool. You got to recognize that was so original at the time. But again, another thing overlooked, enemies and friendlies both drop grenades on the ground, as in from their inventory when they die. And these things can then blow up in the environment. And, anyone who's played Halo knows that there's been a scenario where you throw a grenade, or maybe one of your little harmless sidekicks who's not going to kill anyone on his own throws a grenade, and it happens to set off bloody 7 plasma grenades, and that's it. You just get launched into the stratosphere. It creates a bit of chaos, but it's built upon, like I said, a very early dynamic system. And there is something kind of magic because to the lay mind, right, to me, the idiot normie, it's way more graspable. Don't get me wrong. I love, Satisfactory and systems upon systems and complex AI and all that. But when you kind of really show this low branch mechanical interplay, hey, these dormant grenades on the ground can appear anywhere dynamically as you kill enemies and as friendlies die. And if they get clipped by a live grenade, they will chain reaction detonate. That is actual magic gameplay design. It's also worth pointing out that you can't really talk about Halo without talking about the soundtrack. I need to be a little bit more diligent about this. I'm a huge audiophile. I think actually there's a strong argument that to me, personally, as a gamer, soundtrack might be the most important thing for a game, at least when it gets it right. There can be brilliant games that can stand on their own merit without any music at all, surely. But it is one of these things, especially talking from a YouTuber perspective, it's a blind spot. I just don't know why I don't mention it more in videos, but for whatever reason, I just brush over it. Yet many of the games that I play and that stick with me forever, and I get those gamer memories, I remember on the back of a good soundtrack. Halo is absolutely no exception. It's probably got one of the most iconic gaming themes ever. But the whole suite of songs across the course of it are not only anthem-like, but they're also complementary, which is unusual. You don't usually get two of the same. When I do talk about music, I bring up ambient soundtracks a bit. Quite often there can be good music, but if you ask me to hum it, what's the song from that game or whatever, you couldn't. And I feel like those who write the background ambient complementary music that helps build the tension and the mood often don't get the credit that they deserve because, well, if they're doing it properly, in a way you don't even notice it. So Halo kind of stands apart in a way in that there are so many recognizable songs from the soundtrack. And this could be my bias showing, but I'm pretty sure most people that grew up playing Halo could, not strictly tell you the name of songs or anything like that, but if you played them a certain theme from a certain level, quite often, a lot of them are recognizable instantly to a lot of people. One that especially comes to mind is Truth and Reconciliation when you're going in a nighttime mission sniping. It's one of the earliest missions in the game. And it has this really mellow synthwave hook to it. Anyway, it stands testament. It's better than most soundtracks, most bloody movie soundtracks. The fact that it has so many different themes layered, from your menu type Halo general choral theme to, thunder running on a warthog at the big finale with the big drum bombastica. Like, to many people, those two separate themes are the Halo main song. That is the real magic of the music here, is how diverse and yet recognizable it is. So yeah, look, they're my main sort of really happy points about the game. I have a few criticisms though, and I think maybe I've earned it on the back of my praise. I guess my opinion's my own, but bear with me. Don't put down the pitchforks and just hear me out. So playing the Anniversary Edition or whatever it is, the one that came out 10 years after, you can swap between the two engines running on top of each other, which is very clever. And presumably even for something smaller, this is probably quite resource intensive. That's why you don't see it so much. But also, and you could do a whole video on this, but the remaster culture these days, remakes, look at the Resident Evils and all that, it's not actually really clear whether you're just doing a straight HD up-res, are you building a new engine on top of it, are you making a different game with different perspectives and philosophies. It's very difficult to sort of bank on it, but for this, it's clever, and you can see it's kind of night and day, the graphical improvements. However, I feel that as cool as it is to add more detail and modernize it a little bit, it kind of does take away in some areas. Now, like, I suppose spoiler warning, but it's Halo, crying out loud. But in the back end of the game, they introduce the Flood, and it's definitely more of a horror vibe, right? It starts going down that sort of Aliens inspiration, especially when you've got Chief, as we mentioned before, doing like solo runs through. And you can see it in even just the way that they light the environments. Don't even worry about the technology and the detail or anything like that. But it was clearly dark, oppressive. You have a flashlight for a reason, and they designed it to be kind of scary, kind of reenacting Aliens at the time with the tech. And a lot of that magic is lost in the remake, remaster, whatever you want to call it, because everything is overlit. They've clearly brought it in line with the more modern Halo artistic design, things like Halo bloody Infinite, is that what it was called? Everything's bright, everything's well lit and detailed, and it really takes the teeth out of the Flood, I found. And part of it feels to me like, this is speculative, but maybe, hey, we did all this work on these environments, we want people to see it. This seems to be a more modern way of doing artistic design in games and content. It becomes important to have their work acknowledged, as opposed to, where you'd build an open world and there's a good chance no one would see half your content ever, but that was the nature of the beast, and it was accepted as a cool little point of pride in a way in game development. But again, speculative stuff. But I found that sort of is a weaker part of the new graphics. On top of that, and this will dovetail into another issue, is because of the way that the level design is done in some areas, and that's read as poorly, we'll come back to this, to sort of try and fix that, and specific examples are like the library level, which I think is probably infamous, I could be wrong, as being a kind of miserable level to play because of the level design, or not even lack thereof, but that will be our next point, bear with me. But essentially, it's confusing, it's kind of maze-like, it's difficult to navigate, and in the new graphics version, they've put big, bright, bloody arrows, the equivalent of yellow paint on ladders, if you will. Everyone likes to talk about that. But very obvious telegraph arrows on the ground for you to follow, which is very gaudy. But at the same time, as much as I'm like, yuck, it's a bit harsh to really hold them to account for doing that. To me, it's an admission that they recognize that there is a fault with their early level design from the original game untouched. And so they've tried to help nudge the players and sort of course correct retroactively. It was just interesting because, yes, one part of me looks at the arrows and rolls my eyes, But the other part is like, well, I mean, what is the other option? To redesign the level from scratch? I don't really think that was on the cards. So this dovetails into probably my biggest criticism of Halo, and again, over the years, it seems like this is shared by many. And the level design reminds me of, to use a more modern sort of parlance that I've come up with, when I talk about indie simulator games, let's say like Wall Painting Simulator 2023, a lot of the devs go into it at this base level thought of, well, let's simulate all the mechanics. Let's simulate rolling paint. Let's simulate going down to the shop. Let's simulate having to pay for your parking meter when you go in to fill up your paint roll, right? And they lose the plot because they become so fixated on essentially translating the in-world counterpart into the game. They kind of forget that it's supposed to be a game. It's supposed to be fun. There can be a suspension of disbelief. You can have health bars. Your painting can be more abstracted than actual one-to-one simulation because the abstracted version would be fun. Why am I setting it up like this? Well, because to me, a lot of the environs in Halo, I've not looked, but I bet you could pull up schematics and blueprints of how specifically the Forerunner architecture, the buildings that are on the planet already, all make sense. Like arguably, these buildings and environs were built by engineers. I could see myself in the design in a way where they were like, well, this is what this room would be for and that room. And, you can see that their fixation was making sure that the architecture was realistic and consistent. And then they go, let's now turn this into a level that you move through. And what you end up with on the backside of that is potentially moving through, and there are multiple instances of this, levels, which are levels, right? You'll be on floor 2, floor 3, floor 4, and because of the nature of architectural consistency of how you would build a building, they all look the same. And you start to get confused and turned around back to front. And this is compounded by what I can only assume was about resource management because it's an earlier game. And it's so glaring now that I've replayed it. Much of this game is 50% of it reusing assets in that you'll trek through an environment and then you'll have to trek back out. What is it, Stellar Cartographer? Is that the level? The sort of beach landing on the Pelican early in, the one that everyone remembers, but they probably forget that you find a structure, you go down, the door is locked, then you have to go back up, then you have to find another structure, slightly different, you have to go down that, press a button, you have to come back up that, now you have to go back to the first structure, go down that, through the door. I'm pretty sure once you get to the bottom of that, you might even have to extract back out the top, but don't quote me on that. So, from a clever, hey, let's, double the size of the environments by kind of using half the amount of environments, hey, I respect the hustle for sure. But even the finale mission, going back to the Pillar of Autumn, it becomes very, very obvious that we're retreading the same terrain for the sake of a two for the price of one kind of thing. But the library, as mentioned previously, is probably the biggest offender. And just about anyone I've ever met that's talked about Halo 1 in any capacity, if you bring up the library, I think everyone just universally hates it because you get lost, you're going round and round in circles and then going up layers and then doing it again. And this design philosophy is throughout. However, here's the big shoe to drop on the other foot. I feel like, and to put this all in a circle, the whole reason I want to go back and play older games is because I feel like we might be losing some of the magic, dare I say, with a lot of modern design. I roll my eyes a little bit about people that complain too much about the yellow paint showing you where to go in video games, because to me it's a little bit of a Dunning-Kruger statement. We all know that yellow paint is on the nose, but like it's the people that grab it and run with it that troubles me, because the thing is, all games have this sort of telegraphing to a degree. It's just the ones that you're talking about, it's more obvious. It's a little bit of a self-report. Don't get me wrong, yes, the yellow paint can be on the nose and a bit over the top, but I also wonder if these people realise that yellow paint, in inverted commas, in lighting actually is a great example in this game, directional lighting showing you where to go. A lot of these telltale signs in environmental design show the player where to go. It's just a degree of how obvious it is. But I feel like through that kind of guided subliminal character design, even on the lower level, like forget the small brains that only talk about yellow paint being obvious, even on that subconscious level where the lighting's showing you where to go and you don't really necessarily register it, I feel like maybe we've overdone it and simplified a lot of that design into that art form, where as much as I bashed the back and forth confusing architectural level design of the original Halo, I can't help but think to myself, I kind of yearn for it as well. In the midst of it, as I was getting turned around and a little bit confused by the architecture, a part of me was kind of enjoying the more free-spirited, all right, well, let me walk down a dead end and get lost and all that. So maybe part of it is to blame for the game director's design decisions to let that happen, but it does feel like I have a little bit more agency and less of an on-rails corridor. So yeah, as much as through the modern lens I am critical of that design, I can't help but kind of yearn for it and feel like maybe we've taken it to the nth degree in modern level design and it's a bit watered down now. Anyway, look, they're just my thoughts from Halo. Video went on for a little bit longer than I thought it would be, but I thought I had something to add to the conversation. Following this, I'll probably play Halo 2. I don't know if I'll go straight into it. Again, this idea of 10 years removed appeals to me immensely, and then potentially following on as well. Like, we'll play Halo 3 at some point, but tell me what games you like, look up 2004. What's your favourite from there? I think I saw Far Cry in there. Bloody hell, I saw Escape from Butcher Bay or Dark Athena or whatever. All sorts of cool stuff that year. But maybe we'll do something from 2014, that's keep this train rolling, because the truth is I really enjoyed this. And it could just be because it's such a brilliant game and it holds up so well. But I do feel, at least even for me, for my gamer soul, there was a lot of value in going back and replaying this. And I'm actually really pumped to play the sequel now. Anyway, team, might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.